Santa here. The true spirit of Christmas is giving, and my friend Danny McGee knows that very well. His annual toy run with the Agape Projects helps bring joy to children who need it most. But to reach this year's $80,000 goal, we need everyone's help. So grab your cocoa, hop online, and make your donation at theagapeprojects.org. Together, let's fill hearts and stockings with love.
Coming to you live from Edgewood American Legion Post 17, Harford County Living presents Conversations with Rich Bennett.
Slow pitch affairs today.
Today I'm going to get my hands on it. It's probably the sexy part of work, and I don't know if you're like this answer. That's okay. No, it's fine. The truth is...
As some of you may know, I am president of the Joppatown Lions Club. I've been in the Joppatown Lions Club for, I believe, 26 years now. And one of the things that Lions International was asking clubs to do was to raise awareness on mental health and well-being. So I decided, I brought it up to the club. It's like, why don't we do a panel, a live panel? We'll bring on experts, have them talk about mental health, and this way people in the audience can ask questions. So that's what we decided to do. But then I decided, let's take it even a step further. This way, we can raise awareness with just, more people than what is there to see the panel. So I decided to record the live panel and turn it into a podcast episode. Now, I'm going to bless you all because I am not hosting it. I actually have Rania Nassar from the Harford County Health Department as the moderator. Listen up, because there was some great things brought up about mental health. And we also talked about Be the One. It was taking place at Edgewood American Legion. So we talked about the Be the One program, which is something that's going through American Legion right now to help with people that are going through some type of mental illness, and to bring the number of suicides down. You've heard 22 a day. Now, last I checked, it's down to 17 and a half a day, but that's still way too many. And I'm talking just veterans, not suicide in general. So hopefully you enjoy it. And after you finish listening, please either email me or join the Facebook group and leave comments. And if there's any questions that you have, feel free to ask. And if I can't answer it, I'm sure one of the experts will be able to.
My name is Rania Nassar. I'm the Director of Population Health and the Public Information Officer at the Harford County Health Department, and also a friend of Rich Bennett.
If you tell people.
And I'm really excited to be moderating this podcast today on such an important topic. I want to start off by having all the panel members just go around, introduce yourself, and just let me know a little bit about your connection to mental health.
Hi there. So glad to see you all. My name is Jennifer Redding. I was joking with Rania. I've worn many hats over the past 30 years. More recently, I have a practice here in the county that I created back in 2009 called Harford Counseling. Short of a year ago, I oversaw the behavioral health department for University of Maryland Upper Chesapeake Health. So both hospitals as well as the Klein Family Crisis Center were under my guidance. So I'm excited to be here. I really, really strive hard to break down stigma when it comes to mental health and mental illness because we all are impacted and we all need to talk about it. So thank you, guys.
My name is Laura Crowder. I'm the COO and Clinical Director of Peace Healthcare Incorporated, and I'm also the owner of Elemental Health and Wellness Associates. I'm an LCPC, which is a mental health counselor, and I've been working in the mental health field since I was in high school. I believe it's deeply needed and very much underserved.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Beck from Rage Against Addiction. I'm the founder and executive director, and we have sober living houses for women. So there is a very deep connection between addiction and mental health, and I am a witness to it all the time. And I just wanted to be here to support this group and insert some of my expertise just by running the houses.
And my name is Nolanda Robert. I own a child and adolescent mental health practice, Voice of a Child, LLC. I have 30 plus years experience. I've worked with foster care children, juvenile offenders. I was a behavioral therapist for the University of Maryland in Baltimore City schools. And then I took an 18-year stint overseeing family court, in which I thought that would be easy, but it was full of mental health and substance abuse issues that caused a lot of divorce and custody disputes. And I opened my practice in 2023 in Harford County, and I'm getting all cases that deal with family court issues because the judges are knowing that I am out there now, officially here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Watts. I am the state chairman for Be the One for the state of Maryland. Be the One program is a program that was put together about 4 years ago with the American Legion National Operation. My job as a state chairman is to assist the various posts around the state. There's approximately 2,000 of them, and we are there to assist these veterans from committing suicide. We're losing 22 veterans a day. To give you an example, we have lost, in the last 10 years, 80,000 veterans from suicide. We lost 56,000 in Vietnam War, so that kind of gives you a little bit of comparison. My job is to work with veterans, both active and inactive veterans, and to assist them in getting the proper care that they need through these people that you see in front of you, mental health. The VA has been somewhat lackadaisical in the helping of veterans over the years. That has recently changed by Congress, 116th Congress, that made some changes to the VA. Veterans now can go to any medical facility in the country if they're experiencing suicide issues, and they can get the bills paid for by the VA, which was not a case before. To give you a little bit of comparison, if a veteran was feeling suicidal, they would need to call the VA hospital. As you may well know, a lot of veterans do not participate in the VA hospitals, or the VA for that matter. If they did call the VA, they would get notification that sometimes it would be 30 to 90 days before they could get an appointment. With suicide with a veteran, when they make that call, you've got about an hour. And so you have to move very quickly. So I'm here tonight to talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for those introductions. We're going to go right into our questions for today. So I really want to start off with this first question, because I really want us to kind of set the stage for a discussion for mental health. So I really want to ask you all, from your perspective, what do you see are some of our biggest misconceptions about mental health that you still see today?
Did you want us to go down the row or just answer?
We can prefer. Not everybody has to talk, but whoever feels like they have something to say, you're allowed to say, but don't feel compelled to feel comfortable answering anything.
Okay. So I find that among the biggest misconceptions about mental health are the ideas that A, either a person is putting on, or B, that they're really dangerous. And your average person who's dealing with mental health issues is very much a regular person. They're not going to hurt anyone, and they're not putting on. They really genuinely need help.
And to kind of dovetail off that, sometimes people in all of my careers believe that having a mental health diagnosis is a weakness or having poor character, and that would be the reasoning why people won't like them or why they can't have their child in custody, or things like that. But the other thing is that the misconception is that mental health and physical health are two separate things, and mental health causes some of the physical health. And I do that a lot of training with my my children that I see, because they have stomach aches and different ailments that really are a factor of their stress and anxiety.
My experience with mental health issues is kind of an interesting scenario. Active military, if the issue comes up about mental health, there's a high probability that they will face some issues in their careers. In addition to that, mental health issues, if they're retired as a veteran, a lot of veterans have experienced PSTD, and they are experiencing things that most of us do not have experience in dealing with. So when it comes to relationships and marriage where there are children involved, a veteran, whether it be a female or a male veteran who's experiencing post-trauma from serving in a war zone, many times end up losing their family. They lose their spouses, they lose their job, and eventually they lose their children's visitation rights, simply because people do not understand the issues of mental health, especially from the veteran standpoint, when they've served into a war zone. I've been involved now with veteran suicide for about 23 years, and the stories I've heard are just mind-boggling, and I can see how it affects people and the stigma that comes with mental health issues.
And just to chime in, I think everyone really covered a lot of the things, but two pieces that sort of stick out for me. I do a lot of work with first responders, law enforcement, servicemen and women. And so really hitting home that any sort of mental health issue, the misconception is that it is not a sign of weakness. You can imagine as a first responder, as a serviceman or woman, you have to have your armor on essentially all the time. And so it's really hard to sort of raise your hand and say, you know what, I'm really having a tough time with this. When you take the time to think about all of the experiences that our first responders and our military men and women have been exposed to, it's not hard to understand that that's going to have an impact on you. And so really fighting that stigma. And then the final piece is that oftentimes whenever any of us have sort of a mental health issue of any kind, sometimes it feels very isolating and very alone. And we think, what's wrong with me? That I must be the only person experiencing this. And I think the thing that you're going to hear throughout our talks tonight is that you are not alone. And I just say it over and over and over again. There's tons of people out here that want to support folks, and there's lots of help out there. And so we hope to spread that word.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. What I'm noticing in the recovery community, when someone comes into sober living, they are new in recovery and they are also, I guess, in jeopardy of having mental health issues that may not be treated or not being able to be handled by the staff, or being a peer in the house, or being a resident. We have the responsibility to get them to get involved in the program, but there's a lot of mental health things that are going on that we are not necessarily trained for. So when we come up to a situation like that, I think one of the hardest things is finding them a place to go.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So we've kind of discussed there's not just one or two misconceptions. We do have a wide variety of misconceptions, and that's all part of different areas in mental health that we're discussing. We talked about family, we talked about friends, and so this is a great lead into the next question. So we have family, we have friends we care about. We want to start having that conversation around mental health with them. So how do we approach these conversations with people that we see might be resistant or just afraid to seek help?
I think Nalanda touched on something that speaks to this question for me, and it's understanding the connection between physical health and mental health. And so when someone is having a hard time understanding or, acknowledging their need for support, it's sort of making the analogy, if you were to break your arm, you're not going to hesitate to go to the doctor and get it set and get it fixed. If you have diabetes, you're not going to hopefully, hesitate to go to the doctor and get on whatever medication you need to get physically healthy again. The same can be said for mental health. I think what gets tough is that it's often invisible. Lots of folks think it's just in their head. You hear that a lot. But, I think for me, the message too is that, and this is something we can all do in this room, is just connect and listen. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have it figured out, but it's listening, because that's one of the biggest things research shows. Even I'm a therapist by training, but even more than therapy, having that connection and feeling like someone understands or is trying to understand has such an important impact. So that's what I would encourage you to do.
And I would like to pick up on that in terms of communication. A lot of veterans, because again, I deal with veterans, the communication is breaking down with veterans simply because you can have a veteran and a non-veterans, especially in an environment like this where you have American Legion, you have what's called Sons of American Legion, and some of those haven't actually served in active duty. And then you have the Legionnaires who have actually served in active duty. So they have two different experiences in the military and the civilian life. And dealing with a military person who has served in a war zone, their perspective of how they talk to somebody is quite different than a civilian would have. They feel more comfortable having a conversation with somebody who's, for lack of another term, has been in the ditch with them. They're going to have a more difficult time sitting down and talking to a civilian about time they've served in the military. I know I've been involved with several, I hate to say, suicides that have happened in the military. And the common thread in that is that they felt like they couldn't reach out and talk to anybody because nobody understood what they were trying to say. So I think mental health is a multitude of levels and different, such as the police and the fire and the military, people that are homeless, people that have lost jobs. There's a whole spectrum of issues with mental health. And there's no cookie cutter answer to any of those. But the common thread with it is people being comfortable feeling that they can actually reach out to somebody and somebody will understand what they're trying to get across and being able to help them do that.
And I'm going to add the word fear. Fear is one of the biggest reasons that individuals do not enter into mental health. Fear of stigma, fear of judgment, and also fear of change. And when I say fear of change is when you're going to seek mental health and you're working with a therapist, you're also working on what's going on internally, and you're bringing up things that you have kept down so low that you start having to look at yourself in the mirror. And that is very hard for individuals. I work a lot with children, and their fear is more of a judgment. Like, I don't want my classmate to know I'm in therapy. I don't want anyone to know. It used to be, unfortunately, a lot of my kids, I did this for years. And they used to be like, I don't want to be identified as crazy. And I'm like, it's not crazy for you to get help. What is crazy is if you don't get help. And I'm here to help you feel better about yourself. And so taking away even that word crazy out of the stigma of mental health took a lot. And I'm glad that nobody really uses that term anymore. They use like getting treated, working on themselves. There's all different terms that I'm hearing. So I think that's helping individuals kind of take away some of that fear.
I think wording is so important, and how you use those words is one of the first steps to mental health. So we do need to kind of take a step back sometimes and look at certain words that we use nowadays, the framework, basically. Like, how do we use words when we have these conversations with people to kind of help with, starting that conversation? I think it's really important, and it's not even just for mental health, for health in general. How are we using certain words?
And it's how we talk to ourselves, when we ourselves are having a challenging time. There's something that is so relevant, is that our brains are always listening. So if we're telling ourselves, oh, you're not good enough, or oh, you're crazy, or oh, what's wrong with you, your brain's listening. So words really do make a difference, even for yourself.
And I want to touch a little bit on something quickly that, Mike, you mentioned about other individuals not understanding and experiencing. And I know Wendy will back me up on this situation, but having those peers, especially, we know peer recovery specialists, how important they are in the field of addiction and mental health too. But having those peers be around you, I mean, it's in mental health, a sense of community is so crucial. We talk a lot in public health about social determinants of health. And one of those social determinants of health is one of those aspects is community. And if you don't have that strong community, it's really going to determine how well your health indicators are going to be. So I think it is so important that we continue to, these individuals who have experienced certain things, to kind of make sure that we build that sense of community with them so that they have these conversations. We see it work so well with peer recovery specialists and how amazing they are and what they've gone through and how they've, are in recovery and how they're starting to help individuals get into recovery as well. And that same aspect holds, I think, in mental health. So I think bringing that up is really, really important.
And that's kind of where we at the American Legion, dealing with veterans, we are training our facilities to not be a counselor or a therapist or a psychiatrist. That's not what we're in the business to do. We are a sounding board for these individuals to come in, feel comfortable being able to talk to somebody who's a peer or even somebody who understands, and then being able to listen. Listen is the key element in any of this. If they don't think you're listening, they don't want to talk to you. And then once we teach our members of the American Legion how to listen, then we can point them in the right direction to get the help they need from professionals. And that's the key, is listening. And that's what we train our members of the American Legion to do.
I mean, you're first you are a friend, and that's the most important part. And so when I'm having these conversations with my friends, the first thing I ask them when they need to maybe just pour out a lot of their feelings to me, what do you need me in this moment? Do you need me here to vent, or do you want me to give you advice, or do you want me to help you? And I think that's also one of the beginning parts for those conversations.
And it is. And they have to feel like you're sincere and you're listening. If they feel like you're just being polite, you're kind of hitting a brick wall. You have to really engage with these individuals no matter what level they are in society, because they have to feel like you're willing to engage with them, to step aside and listen and take the time to listen so that they feel like somebody is paying attention to their needs. And if they do that, then you'll find that it opens that door up for them to move to the next process.
And to springboard off of what you just said a little bit, I find that when, as a clinician, people come to me, they already know the letters that go in front of and behind my name. So they know that part. They want to feel me out as a person. They want to know that I care. And listening to them with an open heart and an open mind and not having an agenda other than to meet them where they are is really so important.
Very much so. Yeah. And a lot of times people have a tendency from their own experiences in life to kind of frown down on someone's experiences, or maybe even possibly, while they may not verbally state it, they're condemning them for something they've done. And you have to take yourself out of that and make that person feel like that you are really intentionally trying to help them. And if they feel that, no matter if it's a child or an adult, a veteran or a civilian, that makes that person feel like somebody's sincere about trying to help them.
Absolutely.
In my experience, when someone's in new recovery, it's a very vulnerable time. They've just been through treatment or they're going to some type of outpatient program, and you've removed the drugs and alcohol from their life. At that point, their mental health starts to seep back in. So they have a lot of things that are going on that were numbed from the use of drugs and alcohol. And for us, their behavior starts to change, and they're not just able to work through the program. So they need a higher level of care, and having that conversation with them where we recommend that they need to go and have a therapist or do other things is, hard, because if they're not in the right mindset, they're in jeopardy of going back out and using, and that's a really scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to actually go into our question 4 for now, leading into what are some effective ways that professionals like you all can help normalize mental health discussions in everyday?
I think that sharing our own experiences, as well as those of family who are comfortable with us sharing, just being really down to earth and saying, hey, I haven't had a charmed life. I've had issues too. You're not alone. We're all human.
One of the things that I see from the perspective of the military, all of us at some point have had what's called an interview when we go to apply for a job. In the military, unfortunately, when you get your discharge papers, you don't have an exit interview. So the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these young men and women, they start out of high school and they go right into the military, and they're taught when to get up, when to go to sleep, when to eat, when to have fun. And so now they're discharged and they're placed into society. And when they're put in that environment, it's kind of like a dark room with no lights in it. And they have a hard time adjusting to that. So I think the fact that you have to open that light up and turn that light on in the room, no matter what the circumstances are, to let those people know that there is help out there for them. There is measures to help them without condemning them and out feeling bad. And again, I just want to emphasize the fact communication is the key to all of this. Without communication, you will not get anywhere. And they have to, again, feel like that what you have to say has value and merit, and that you're there to help them.
And I just want to jump in with a little bit more about something that you said. You talked about judgment and condemnation. And I would encourage anyone, if you've gone to a professional that's doing that to you, get a new professional.
Right.
You would not take your car to someone who did a terrible job working on it. Don't see someone for healthcare that's doing a terrible job for you.
Don't be around somebody that's condemning you or making you feel bad about your feelings. You need to get out of that environment and find somebody that will put you in a positive position.
Precisely, yes.
All right. So I'm going to ask my next question, which is probably one of my favorite questions because I'm a public health professional. But how can mental health care become more accessible and culturally responsive for all communities?
So I do teaching on this a lot internationally because I do a lot of work on cultural competency and looking at mental health. And so we really need to meet people where they are, but some of it is also placing a lot of mental health services in places like schools and community centers and faith-based centers, making it more accessible. The problem is it's not very accessible. The problem is that individuals have a hard time finding mental health providers. Um, I remember in the courts trying to find therapists for children, and it sticks in my head to this day that this one lady said, well, I have a waiting list of 236. And I was like, that's absurd. And okay, like it didn't make sense, but it also told me that there's not enough mental health providers out there. But when I say being culturally aware, depending on what the culture of the person that's coming to you, when I worked at Sinai Hospital, I had a high caseload of Orthodox Jewish faith. And so I took the time to learn about the Orthodox Jewish faith because it helped me work with my kids and the families, because some of what they were dealing with was family related, and from the things they had to do, the ways they had to do some of the religious I can't even say how I want to say that, but regimen. I'm going to say it that way. But some of that was dealing with a lot of anxiety and where that anxiety came from. So learning in the courts, we deal with lots of cultures. And so working with those families as well and being able to identify what the needs are, because what my culture believes might be not what your culture believes, and being able to be unbiased when having these mental health sessions or teaching individuals about mental health. Because in some cultures, mental health is not You're not supposed to seek that help. You're supposed to keep it internally in the household and not let what other people would say, not let public know your business. And I remember growing up, and that was one of the things as a kid. We're not going to let everybody know what our business is, Nolanda. Just letting you know, keep it internal. So, and I deal with a lot of that is in African culture. That does happen an awful lot. You do not go to the school and disclose what happens behind closed doors.
I'd like to follow up on something she mentioned. You hear me talking about veterans, but I want people to understand that veterans have families and they have wives or husbands, they have children. And so when a veteran goes through stress and they go through depression and they go through these turmoils in their life, it affects their family members. So while the American Legion is concentrating on the veteran and their needs, the individual that we're working with also needs to be aware that the family's being affected by this as well. And they're kind of left out in the dark because I've seen these cases where a veteran will, in a suicide position or be institutionalized, and then the family's left with the turmoil and how do they pick up the pieces. And kids don't understand these things. And sometimes even adults don't understand these things. So mental health from the position where I sit, is a family issue, especially when you have turmoil in a family where there are suicide discussions or threats or even anger and madness. This throws a family into a position that everybody becomes fearful and they're not sure the level of fear. And then when people say, well, you need to talk to somebody, get mental health, that throws an additional fear into them because now they're going to think that people think that they're crazy or they're not very stable. And so as a society, we need to make sure that we understand that there's more to an individual in a family unit. There are other people affected by that.
And regarding culture, I think, certainly it's upon all of us to learn as much as we can, but I think, you're never going to know all that you can. So there's something that I sort of have coined is authentic curiosity. And so obviously when you come to see a therapist, let's just be straight. There's a power differential. You're coming to a professional, and I mean, we are professionals, and you're asking them for help. And sometimes that can feel off-putting. It can feel intimidating. And so from my perspective, I genuinely don't have all of the answers. I don't think I have all of the answers. I'm here to listen, help you sort of shift perspectives so that you can arrive where you need to arrive to get healthy. But I think as a clinician, it's genuinely asking questions to better understand where that person is. Culture is a piece of it, so that we can understand and not assume we know, even because we might know some things about a culture, but, we're all individuals, we're all different. We come from different backgrounds. And so really genuinely coming at it, out of curiosity.
And to kind of follow what you were saying a little bit more. When I'm assessing somebody, I'm listening for what's important to them. And, culture can interface with other cultures, even within the same person. And so I want to hear what's important to you. I want to know what your identity is about. And sometimes people help me to learn about them, but it behooves me. It's my responsibility to learn about the culture that they're a part of so that I can better serve them.
Thank you. I do have one thing to add to that. When someone comes into a situation where they're in recovery from addiction, we don't necessarily know if the reason for their addiction was because of their trauma and or mental health issues. And then once they have an addiction issue and they come out of it and join recovery, they have a lot of anxiety and depression at that stage. So, the culture is that this person has a stigma of being an addict or an alcoholic, but what led them to that, we don't know where it started or if it was after their addiction. So it's all kind of intertwined. And it's not something that you can just say, oh, the stigma of being an addict or an alcoholic is because of this, because of the substance use, where it could be from trauma before, or it could be trauma during, and the anxiety and depression after.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That question is really important to me. I am first generation American. My father, Palestinian Jordanian, my mother, Lebanese, born in Lebanon. And I've seen what they've experienced and everything coming to America and all that stuff. And I've understand, a lot that they've gone through and the conversations I have. And when I first, reached out to them and let them know, hey, I'm going to start seeing a therapist, the conversation was different. And, for them too, is also like, no, exactly what Melinda said, what do you mean? Like, we don't talk about it to other people. We keep our business inside. And it got to a few more conversations where we kind of really discussed the importance of talking to a third party and, the importance of maybe them talking to a third party. And then I got them into talking about mental health. And it's just really important. And I think too, with these conversations, to be culturally responsive too, like, yes, I'm a child and I shouldn't be taking care of my parents, but making sure that that family conversation constantly always happens and there's always opening for that conversation is really important. So next question I want to go into is talking about conversations you might have with your clients. So how do you foster trust and connection with clients who may feel hopeless or closed off? How do you foster trust and connection with clients who may feel hopeless or closed off?
So we already talked a little bit about this in terms of non-judgment and just being open-minded and open-hearted. A lot of times people have really gone through it, not only to get to the point where they're needing help, but to talk themselves into walking through that door or making that phone call, sending that email to reach out to us. And so just being a real person with them and not putting on airs, hearing what they have to say, and letting them know how I can help. And if we need to plug in other services, also not thinking I can solve all the problems of the world. There's expertise that I don't have. And there are a lot of people out there that are very talented in a number of different things. And so having the humility to know when to plug a person into another service is also important because we want to bring that support around in a holistic way for them.
All right. How would you all envision the future of mental health care in your community or just across Harford County?
I've been wanting to see mental health integrated all over
Yes.
Harford County. I have been talking to people about, can we have a mobile mental health where we end up in a community and we're able to provide to the clients that can walk to us, because not everybody has transportation. And let's be clear, if we don't have a car, we do have some busing, but it's very hard to get around in Harford County. And we have rural areas and we have, more municipality areas, but still sometimes, children, adults can't get to those agencies. And so therefore I would love to see that layer. I've talked to a couple of different people who work with the health department and other agencies that are like, this is a great idea. How do we make that work? Because that would help individuals know, okay, I can walk to see the therapist. I can walk to talk to someone. It's that's in a vision of mine. In working with all the families I have worked with throughout the 30 plus years, what I have found is that I feel like we've lost more therapists than gained more therapists, if that makes sense to anyone. So there's, people decide they don't want to do this anymore. And so therefore, there's sometimes people are sitting on waiting lists. So we're not getting to those individuals. And how do we effectively get to people? I kind of like a mental health, how doctors used to go door to door, and give, medical services. I feel like some way it would be nice to have door-to-door mental health services.
I think the issue with mental health is a serious educational issue, and that is that society that we live in puts a stigma on mental health. And until society understands that you can be an IQ of 160, and we've known some of those people in our past history that have had mental issues, while they may be very smart, they're having issues. And I think as a society, we have to accept the fact that all of us at some point in time in our life go through a trauma, go through depression, go through issues, and mental health is just part of life. And until we educate society that no matter if you're a school teacher, a police officer, a military person, or a judge, and I work in the legal system, we all have these issues, and that is that there are times in your life that mental health will come up and slap you in the face when you think you're the perfect specimen of a human being, and you'll have trauma laid in your lap. And so until we educate society that mental health is a normal process, and it's like going to see a doctor when you have the flu. If you've got an issue, you need to understand that there are people there that can help you and get you through that process. It's not a permanent thing. It's not a life expectancy that you're going to have these problems the rest of your life. But the key is to seek out help and know that people, when you do seek out help, they're not condemning you for that purpose.
And can I just say one quick thing off that is one of my biggest quotes is everyone could use a mental health therapist. You're usually you're using your best friend, you're using somebody in your family that you're close to, but you are talking about your feelings. And I think that if everyone realizes that, that is their outlet, maybe talking to their best friend, talking to their spouse or whomever, but everyone could benefit from having a mental health therapist.
I just want to add one thing from experience as a young guy. I remember when I was 22 years old, I was dating this girl, and she was telling me she was going to a therapist. And I thought to myself, boy, what's wrong with this lady? And I had no clue. And she said to me one day, would you come to the therapist with me? And I was scared to death because I'm thinking to myself, what is she taking me? What is she taking me into? What am I walking into? Well, the first thing that happened was when I walked in the door, they told me I had to pay a $75 fee. And I'm thinking to myself, so not only am I going to have an issue here, I got to pay for it. So we sat down and I listened to this guy talk, and she's telling him about how she spent her week with me and things she did. And I walked out of there with a different perspective. And I understood that it's a place where you can kind of vent and you can kind of get sounding board. And you can kind of get this experience that you wouldn't get from sitting at somebody with a bar or a dinner table, that it's somebody that can kind of give you some perspectives, not always good or bad, but just gives you a different perspective to look at things. So that was my first experience as a 22-year-old guy walking into a therapist's office, and I had no clue what was going on. So it definitely changed my perspective because I just had this image of some guy sitting behind the desk with his beady-looking glasses is going to try to analyze me for the rest of my life, and it didn't happen.
I'd like to say what I'd like to see in Harford County. I am a parent. I have a daughter. She's 20, and we had a really, really difficult middle school and high school experience. A lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and it was a part of the COVID situation again for her. And I really felt like there were no resources for me as a parent of where to go. There was no support from NAMI in Harford County when I tried to seek that. It was very hard to get a therapist. So I feel like as a parent dealing with something like that, I was lost. I had no idea. And you have someone who is resistant to any kind of therapy or, their own feelings. So I feel like we would be better served to educate families in some way and have resources for them to go to that are accessible when they are needed. Because you can't plan when you're going to need that type of service.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And in Harford County, here's my public health analyst. In Harford County, our entire county is actually designated as a mental health professional shortage. So the entire county is actually dedicated to that, which means that we're just in a shortage of mental health professionals in Harford County in general. Now, what does it really mean? I mean, there's some benefits if you're a mental health professional, you can come in and maybe get some type of benefit to pay back your loans and things like that. But we need to really look deeper, in my opinion, into ways on making advertising Harford County as a good place to live and a good place to work, so that these mental health professionals can come here and work. And we need to also continue to promote mental health professionals or just getting a mental health degree to kids. I mean, maybe we need to talk about it more. This is an option. What are the different groups? Maybe somebody doesn't really want to work with adults. Well, you don't have to just work with adults. You can work with kids, or maybe you want to work with a different population. So, for me, I'd love to envision Harford County as a place that doesn't have a mental health shortage, and that there is no waiting lines, and there is a way to get it, and it's affordable, because who wants to pay $75? That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And there's something else I'd like to add, and most people are not aware of this. Most people have health insurance policies. And if you look at your health insurance policies, it allows for therapy. It allows for you to be able to see a physician. A lot of people think it's an out-of-pocket expense, but a lot of insurance companies now have realized that it's preventive medicine. And so if you're concerned about not having to be able to pay the bill, and $75 was cheap, we're talking about in the 70s, late 70s, it's probably $150 now. But your insurance policy will cover a lot of these mental health evaluations and therapists. But you have to look at your policy and to determine if that's something that, and how much they pay and how many visits you're allowed to have. And you ladies probably know more about that than I do, because I'm sure you're dealing with these insurance people that come in. But it has shifted. There was at one time, there was no coverage, and now it's shifted to that coverage now.
It's true.
Well, sorry. I mean, this is something that I feel very passionate about as well. Now, I know that there are mental health first aid courses that you can take, but I don't think that there's enough. So I think we need to ramp that up, and we need to target it towards parents, because parents do not know what to look for. They do not know when to act, when not to act. They don't know how to interact with their high schoolers or their middle schoolers when they're going through these types of things, because I grew up in a generation where it was like, you're going to be okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But we're not dealing with that now. They don't accept that as an answer. They're feeling all their feels. They have a lot of exposure to social media, which is creating an underlying problem.
Yes.
And I don't think that we're addressing that at all.
Yeah. I will concur with that from seeing children and adolescent a lot. I hear a lot that my mom or dad don't pay enough attention. They're in their screens, they're in their phones, they're texting, they're sleeping, they're behind closed doors working. I actually had a client and both her parents were therapists, and I was like, oh, really? I'm like, and you're here with me, because they were not paying attention to her and her needs. And a lot of parents miss the suicidal red flags. And it's really sad, because it gets to the point where they're at the Klein Center because they've missed the sign and they've walked into a circumstance. So I always say, please be mindful, spend time with your children, check in with your children as often as possible. And that is a big need. I love the first aid for parents, maybe to identify some of these things that they can look for when they're seeing their kids and observing them from middle school through high school and younger.
Yeah, and I feel like the culture has changed from me growing up to having children that are in their phones all the time, and you have no idea what's going on. So if they're going through something hard, you don't know. They're in their phones, they're behind their closed doors, and by the time you notice, it has escalated to a place where you have no idea where to even step in.
I love that idea.
I would also love to see more access or more visibility of the mental health professions within the schools for kids, so that they see that clinician on a daily basis, or that they see clinicians coming into their classrooms and giving talks about issues they might be going through. And we touched a little bit on social media. I think it can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes you deal with lots of abuse on social media, but I also see younger clients who come in and they say to me, I have this issue. I saw this on TikTok. And I'm like, well, TikTok doesn't diagnose.
Exactly.
But, let's talk about what what you're noticing, and we'll go from there. But Wendy's really right that we come from a generation where it was like, suck it up and deal with it. And I love the emotional attunement of younger people because I was talking to a colleague who's less than half my age, and she was talking about self-care. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, I love that you're speaking that way because we didn't have that as a lexicon until fairly recently. It was just put your head down and keep trudging forward.
That kind of feeds into it. If you don't mind, I really want to skip and talk about both youth and adults. So we're seeing rising levels of anxiety among both youth and adults. What connections have you all observed between increasing anxiety and maybe the onset of substance misuse? And how can we better address these issues early on so that we can prevent that progression?
So anxiety in youth has skyrocketed. I think every client that I see has anxiety. Some of it is circumstantial. It has to relate to school and being bullied. It has to relate. COVID really did a whammy. I will say that it really increased after COVID. Kids didn't know how to interact with each other anymore. The social emotional component completely flew out the door, and kids don't know how to relate. So then now they're anxious about the situation of going to school, their peers, and just dealing with life in general. And so therefore we start self-medicating. And some kids have admitted to, raiding the bar at mom and dad's house, being able to access marijuana, the gummies and things like that. That's why I used to be in the courts and say, parents, I know it's now medically approved. Please put your gummies away, lockbox, etc., because your kids who are depressed or having anxiety are going to want to access that. So I work with a lot of kids about how to work with their anxiety, how to build up their self-esteem and their self-worth, because that is the other second problem I'm seeing is that especially in the girls, they have very, very low self-esteem and cannot seem to identify that they are good, beautiful individuals. And so therefore that makes them feel like everyone is against them. They don't trust peers very well. And then that increases the suicidal ideations. So there is a lot of things that are going on with our youth. And again, there's not a lot of child and adolescent therapists. Specialty is play therapy. So I make sure that we don't have to talk all the time. I can watch what you do with your sand play, with your art, with anything else I'm asking to do. And so therefore, and also when hands are busy, they talk anyway. So they're just chatty Cathy's, and you get a lot of information out of them because they're distracted by that hands-on. But I have seen children and adolescents increase with therapy. And I think parents need to be able to identify what, again, those signs look like, but also make your children feel safe that they can talk to you. A lot of times children do not feel like they can talk to a parent. Sometimes parents are rushing, so they brush them off. And then all that brushing off, all that does is make them internalize, and then you don't get that that result that you want for your kid to be able to tell you anything that you want. And to dovetail off of TikTok is their therapist. I mean, I've had kids come in and I'm like, I'm bipolar 2 and he's narcissistic, and I'm like, well, how do you know this? Really? Well, the lady on TikTok, well, we're not listening to TikTok anymore. Like, turn it off. Like, they are not mental health therapists. And you have to train our youth in that. I see kids as young as 4. I have kids who are 4 who are very, very anxious. And so that comes from a lot of households. That comes from domestic violence. That comes from a plethora of reasons. So I think with children, I try to treat them with a very soft glove and having an open door. And I think it's very beneficial to them. And I think parents will see great improvements when children are able to let go of that anxiety.
I think the other piece with social media, it's relevant for all of us, but I think it's in particularly important with kids who are always on their tablets or always on their phone. When you think about our physical bodies, our nervous systems, our brains, that really puts us all into this hypervigilant state. We're overstimulated. If you can remember, I don't know how old folks are, but I grew up in the age before computers, and so I didn't have the internet when I was an itty bitty kid. And so you actually got to experience being bored. You say that like that's like a 4-letter word. Now I'm bored. What? And so the beauty of being bored is that it helps your nervous system sort of re-regulate itself. Our kids are not getting that privilege anymore. And so they are constantly stimulated. And so that then translates into anxiety. As adults, I find myself when I've had a really tough day, I find myself even more so on my phone. I now understand my nervous system, and I understand that I need some blackout time. I need some quiet time, and that helps to reset. And so I think that's something that we all need to start being able to put words to. I love that kids have the vocabulary and can name feelings such as anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an amazing sort of thing, but I think it's helping them understand what that anxiety is. It's your body's reaction to feeling some of those symptoms, such as your heart's racing, maybe your palms are sweaty, maybe you're feeling really fidgety in your seat. And so, those are all physical symptoms. And so they require sort of a physical outlet. It's energy that's pent up. And so when you can sort of help kids connect the dots and adults and make sense, and there is actually physical things that you can do to release that. Obviously, I'm not talking about some of the long-term things that we need to address in the therapy room, but in the moment when it feels like you're crawling out of your skin, those are some very real things. And so I think it's helping to connect the dots on where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what you were talking about there is somatic attunement. And so being able to actually be in our bodies. And part of what these lovely devices that are such wonderful tools allow us to do is to dissociate from our bodies. Our consciousness is pretty much focused on that device, and we're not paying attention to what's going on in our physiology. And paying attention to those cues that you mentioned can help us to plug back into them and re-regulate, and also to re-embody. And that's an important thing for people to relearn. I've noticed that the amount of dissociation has gone up exponentially since the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're teaching kids and adults. I see adults more so than kids, but you see it with kids. And I'm not sure if you see it kids and adults. But I see it in every age range that there are people that are just so disconnected and disjointed from themselves as a coping mechanism. And so we have to learn how to get them safely back in their bodies so that they can re-regulate.
One of the things I wanted to talk about just a moment here is suicide among not only veterans but children. Unfortunately, we live in a society where children and suicide in general is glamorized on both the internet and in movies and shows and television. And young children are very absorbent. They take in a lot of their brain's like a sponge. They take this in. And I've talked to a couple of veterans who have attempted suicide, and their children have found out about it. And then to them it's a funny situation. It's like my dad tried to commit suicide, and so they accept it as a form of dealing with life when life gets into a situation where it's to them it's unbearable. One of the things I look at when I look at suicide issues is the number of children that's increasing in suicide, and it is a shame because our society makes suicide look like it's our way out. It's when you can't deal with anything anymore, it's time to check out. And I think it's something that we need from both adults and children, that we need to educate all the above, the adults and the children, that suicide is not the way out. The way out is to find a resource to help you get through your temporary problem. Suicide is an issue that people believe it's going to end their problem, and they don't realize that the issue that they're having is a temporary issue. And I've talked to a lot of veterans who have stepped down from pulling the trigger because somebody talked to them, and then after they sat and looked at it, they said, well, a year later, I look back on it and I thought, well, it's not as bad as I thought it was. And kids don't have that ability to think like that.
They don't have the
To
perspective.
them, it's an instantaneous, let's get rid of this, especially young teenagers. They're seeing this stuff on TikTok. You can go on, you can actually, if any of you are interested, you can go on and put in Google suicide, and it'll give you all kinds of ways to do it. There's a slew of suicide issues all over the world. And anybody that wants to commit suicide, they'll walk you through it and tell you how to do it. There was a time in our society that you would never find that. And now it's readily available to a 6-year-old or a 60-year-old. And it's something we need to be cognizant of.
Thank you. I want to go back to the mental health and addiction conversation. So, how can mental health and addiction services become more integrated to better support individuals who are struggling with both at the same time?
This is one of my soapboxes. That's why I started my practice back in 2009, because there's such, back then in particular, but even today, there's this silo effect of, you either treat the substance use behavior or you treat the mental health issues. You don't treat them together. And obviously there are things that you have to tend to, but I think training is incredibly important. I do a lot on supervision and, and leadership for clinicians, and you would be shocked on how many clinicians are afraid to treat someone who has substance use issues. And I find it astounding because when you are caring for someone, obviously you need to care for that entire person, whatever those issues are that they're presenting. So from my perspective, we're responsible as professionals to get training. If you're not familiar with what to do, educate yourself. I think it's also just really important, and I don't know how else to put it, but you have to check your ego. I work with a lot of professionals from different backgrounds, and egos tend to get in the way on a daily basis. And so if you're truly trying to make a difference, trying to care for people, you need to check your ego. So those are my 2 cents.
I think that when someone leaves treatment, they are provided with a lot of medication. They are provided with medication so that they could sleep, for their anxiety, for depression, for medication that they were on before, some that are new to them. And I think that it's to handle the immediate problem at discharge or as a result of the treatment that they had in treatment. Sorry, this kind of sounded redundant, but then no one follows up. And we find that they're on this entire bag of medicine. They don't even know why they're on half of it. And maybe they shouldn't be on a lot of it and it should have stopped. So I feel like that's a missing piece where they don't even know what they're on or why they're on it.
Yeah.
So, kind of having a more follow-up just because you're in a 30-day treatment and you leave, you need to have that follow-up component. Do I really need to be taking all of these things, and why am I taking them?
No.
And I think that's where responsibility as clinicians comes into play as well. I don't think any of us up here are prescribers, but we certainly interface with them. And while they don't like to be told what to do from therapists, I'm an advocate for my clients. I always tell them I'm team you. And so if that involves me having a frank conversation with your doc about thinking that you're over medicated because you're having this, and this symptom, uh, because of the medications, I'm going to have that conversation if you want me to. And educating clients about what some of the side effects can be, because I find very frequently that docs don't tell them about the side effects. And then I have the clients coming in and they're blushing and, and I'm like, let me guess, you're having some side effects here. And some of them can be hard for them to discuss. And just being willing to hear that and being on our toes enough to know, oh, that's probably this med that you're on. We need to get that tweaked so that you're feeling better and you're not having your life adversely affected by your meds. That's kind of the old school way was you trade it off. You had to deal with these awful side effects to feel a little bit better. And that's not always the case. There are a much greater variety of medications on the market, and not everybody needs medication. I find that in our society, as soon as I hit 40, whenever I went to a doctor and they'd say, how many meds are you on each day? What are your daily meds? And I said, none. They'd look at me like I was crazy. There, I used the word crazy. They'd look at me like I was crazy. And I was like, we shouldn't think it's weird to not be on a medication if you're of a particular age. But we also shouldn't pathologize it if people need that to be healthy and safe.
And I was just going to say, when it comes to mental health and addiction, if an individual has both, you have to treat both at the same time because they are both it's a cause and effect with both of those. And to touch a little bit about medication, I find it's very interesting, and I love my parents I work with, and I see more parents doing this. A lot of parents are not trying to go medicate their children automatically. They want to see how the therapy process will work first. And I work with the school teachers and other professionals to ensure that we can work on the behavior. Let's try to stop the impulsivity and the ADHD without the use of medication. Sometimes it works, and then sometimes we have the conversation about, some things are hereditary. And some things we can't fix without having to go to that last step. And then that works and they're behaving, but we're still working through how to use those tools to still decrease impulsivity and ADHD behavior, and, how to work on if we're sad and depressed, and all those feelings, trying to reduce the amount of medication that an individual needs.
All right, I'm going to try to close up with like a few last questions. One thing, because we're talking a lot, we talked a lot about TikTok, but what what would get? Hey, look, I use TikTok a lot for recipes, so it's really bad. So what gives you all hope when you think about the next generation's approach to mental health? Think of me, a millennial.
I think the educational process is something that gives me hope, because from being involved with veteran suicide, a lot of veterans never had the ability to understand where they are and where they're heading. And because organizations like I'm involved with, and individuals like all of you here, and doctors who have helped these individuals, that educational process is one that is so valuable that I think in the future, the issues we're talking about here tonight in the next 25 to 50 years will be something that people will look back at and say, well, things have really changed a lot, and people will become more educated. People are smarter in this generation than they were a generation back, and they will be smarter than our generation going forward. So I think education is something that mental health will be a valuable tool, and people will understand, whether it be self-diagnosis or whether they have the ability to go on TikTok and find out and what their issues are, and then seek out a counselor. So I think education will be the future of mental health.
And I was going to say, I think young people today are more vocal. They don't feel it's a stigma to have a diagnosis or to need work or to need to improve themselves. And so I think that's very helpful. They're willing and able to walk through that therapy door. They might be still a little nervous, but they are willing and able to do that. And I also find like in teenagers, they're relying on each other. Unfortunately, some of the teenagers are talking to their best friends about feeling suicidal and self-harm. And I ask my client, what do you do with that? Are you taking that to an adult at all? Are you taking it to your mom to tell that mom so she's able to monitor her own child? So we have those discussions because youth are sticking up and helping each other when they're in these friendships that are best friends. I do find that sometimes it's kind of cliquey too, that they are like, oh, we're all depressed. And that's something also to monitor because it's that TikTok, diagnosis generation.
Badge of honor.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'd like to address something you were just talking about. I had an experience where 5 young men at the age of 25 were all friends, and they all went through an issue with relationships or loss of jobs. And within a month, all 5 of them committed suicide. They were all friends. Also, there's a American Legion post in Laurel that 3 young men that were active at Fort Meade, one was 26, one was 34, and one was 36. All 3 committed suicide within 2 weeks of each other. One of the things that seems to be related to suicide issues is that it's kind of like a pack. It's like a pack of wolves. I hate to say that terminology, but it's like one for all and all for one. And one of the things we need to talk about, whether they be children or adults, is just because this person committed suicide doesn't mean it's okay for you to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. There are various reasons, but I caution people about people that kind of joke around with suicide. My friends talking about suicide. That's a very triggering issue. As a therapist or as an individual that works with these people, when I hear that, it perks me up immediately because there are packs forming and you have to be very careful of those packs.
I'm sorry. No, I'm just saying, as a parent and the social media and all of the things that our teenagers have gone through, I think that in the future, I think we're gonna make changes because of the fear. Because I'm genuinely, scared for these kids. So I think in the future, we are going to have to make changes because of the fear of what's happening right now. And maybe that's going to be the catalyst to make those kids, when they get older, to be able to educate us and their kids going forward. This is a very different time. We never experienced anything like this before.
Right. And to kind of follow along that track, I think that the community that kids are forming is so powerful, and it can be either very detrimental or very beneficial. And one of the things that I find hope in with younger people is their emotional maturity. I see people, again, half my age, that are more emotionally mature than people double their age and more. And I feel that young adults really get kind of kicked down a lot and told that they're too up in their feelings and that sort of a thing. They've got a lot to be up in their feelings about. I mean, let's be honest. And so validating that and actually listening to them, either as a clinician, as a family member, as a friend, as a colleague, as a parent, I think it's important to listen and to know that where they're coming from is their reality.
All right. Last big question. If you could leave our listeners with one heartfelt message about healing, what would it be?
For me, loud and clear is that you're not alone. Again, that, when we get in our heads and we think we're the only ones experiencing whatever it is, or that We're just so isolated. That's what keeps us from asking for help and receiving support. It's often, the catalyst for suicide. And so, just sort of keeping it really simple. You're not alone. There are people who care about you and who want to provide you that support. You just have to let us know.
I would say that healing is possible. And whether we're talking about addiction, whether we're talking about suicide, sometimes just interrupting that momentary impulse of, I'm going to do this thing, be it I'm going to use my substance of preference or I'm going to kill myself, interrupting that thought, having that time frame pass where you're not acting on that impulse makes you less likely to act on it. And then we can reach in and support them from there. And building in those protections, building in those safeties, and just knowing that healing is possible. That would be my biggest message.
What I've seen with the women in the houses or the teenagers that I've interacted with my daughter's friends over the years is that having empathy. And when you can truly show them that you care and you might not have all the answers, but you're there, sometimes you were the first person that has actually done that for them.
And I'm going to say healing is not linear. Healing is going to have its ups and downs. And sometimes in moving forward, you're going to become stronger, more compassionate, but it will take some hurdles involving with that. And again, you're not alone. And I think entering into therapy and wanting to heal is the bravest thing that someone can do.
And I would like to close in saying that one of the things involved in the veterans is what's called a buddy check. Now, a buddy check can be used both in civilian and in military. A buddy check is to find someone in your circle of friends. And if you don't have that person that you feel comfortable with, then seek out a therapist or a physician or a neighbor or somebody that you have trust in and that you believe and they have the best interest for you. And then when you feel in a position where you're vulnerable and you're depressed and you're confused, that you can reach out to that buddy, whatever that is, whether it's a female to female, a male to female, and vice versa, be able to reach out to that person. And that person needs to let each other know, those two people, that I'm available for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't care where you are or what you're doing. If you find yourself in that position, I'm a phone call away or a car ride away, because that is the first line of defense in any mental health issue, is that they have somebody they can reach out and talk to.
And I'd like to leave my last impression by just reiterating how amazing of a community we have here in Harford. Just the wonderful people that are sitting in front of me, Rich for putting together this podcast, but the fact that you all are here listening is really important. So I want to thank everybody on this panel here and everybody here that's listening, and especially my friend Rich. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for our lovely panel up here?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you. I have three situations where I include all of what you're talking about. And this was in the 80s. My 14-year-old nephew talking about what you were saying about the cat. Well, he was extremely smart. And they were in a group of smart kids. And five kids committed suicide.
And that's what's called, that's pack suicide. That's what it's referred to.
And I don't know if they had any places to reach out to either at that unifies, and we don't really know. I think he felt left out of the world. He was so smart to be sitting with anybody other than a kid.
Well, let me just say this to you. There are signs and signals when these things start happening, and you can reach out to professionals, and it's a little late for that now, and I understand. But for people that are listening and in the future, if you see your child or relative or a friend having certain things going on in their life. Pack suicide is a very common thing. They don't actually have to be physically touching. There's pack suicides online. A lot of this is going on now. So there are people out there that can help. We have a whole bunch of ladies up here and men in the field that can do that. But the key to any of that is awareness. If you have awareness and if you learn, I mean, even if you don't read up on it, there are resources through Google or other sources that you can find information about how to look for suicides issues and how to prevent them and how to talk to these people. But pack suicide is a very common thing. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to hear that for your nephew.
And I was going to say, and it is more active now amongst our youth and all on the online threshold. I've had a couple parents catch it on the youth's phone where they see they've been having those conversations with other people online. And so for everyone else to be mindful of that, because that's still a big thing for children and adolescents.
Yeah, definitely.
So the other thing is my neighbor is going through a problem, and I'm sure she's depressed because her husband has Alzheimer's and he's 61, and he's going through he is going downhill the past year. So the other day she posted on Facebook out. He said, "I don't know how I can do this anymore," and we see it all the time. So I guess when they're finally out of the house. And that just makes so much of a difference. So she was like, "Why are you here?" So just something simple to anybody mental health, would be so, she was so welcoming and was so glad I kissed her. And only a few minutes.
The human touch is an amazing thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that person, I'm sure when you left, that person felt the warmness of that human touch. Sometimes that's all it takes to let them know that somebody cares about them.
I think sometimes we overcomplicate it, and it's just holding space with another person sometimes can make all the difference. Obviously, there are resources, but in that moment, that's exactly what she needed, and you provided that for her. So certainly.
And don't quit.
Yeah.
You did such a beautiful thing and a beautiful job. And if you need any resources, I'm sure any of us, and I want to say I'm glad to, and I don't want to volunteer other people, but I believe all these wonderful people would as well, help you with resources if you need them.
One of the main things I have from was that our son is going through a lot of mental health. I know I've been told now, but he's pushing us away. For the past year, we haven't been able to he's called probably 30 times during this year. But it won't communicate to us. So that fear that all you were talking about, how do we break through?
I have a question for you. Is he ex-military or military at some point? Okay. Good.
I mean, I find that individuals start isolating themselves when they're feeling really, really down, and to continue to do that outreach to him, to try to let him know that you are there for him. And, I even say show up at the door. If you know where he's at, knock on the door. He may or may not answer that door, but he knows that you are wanting to have that contact. Once you get that contact, that's when you can really be effective at saying, okay, let's talk about this. How are you feeling? We're okay. Let's get you to see somebody so you can talk out those feelings. Letting them know it is okay to not feel okay. And a lot of people don't understand that it is okay to feel okay, not okay. Some days I don't feel okay, but having him know that you two are there to support him, continue doing what you're doing. And again, we can give you some resources, slip it under the door. Like we can give you all the tools you need to try to get to.
This is a common family issue. All of us, I have issues, and people in my family, they don't speak to each other. So it's not uncommon. But I found through my own personal experience of dealing with family members is persistence. Persistence is the tool that makes that other person feel like you're not giving up on them. And if you don't give up on them, they won't give up on you.
And also, if he's not picking up the phone, you can send him a text. You can send him a card in the mail.
Or write him a letter.
Write him a letter. I had a friend who was feeling down, and she broke her arm and can't make her food. And I sent her some oatmeal, and she got it today. And she said, "How did you know this is my favorite flavor?" And I said, "I didn't. I just guessed." And, so little things like that. You already do a lot of healing with the people around you. And so just keep going with your heart there and sharing the resources that you find.
I hope we helped you.
And next question.
Yeah, so mental health is a very broad umbrella, right? And so we've got a lot of specialization in the field. You got veterans and military, you got children, you got women, you've got substance abuse correlation issues. I understand we have a shortage of health professionals, mental health professionals in the county and on the greater spectrum. Why do you think it is from within the field? Why are there so few men practitioners and men-focused practitioners? I know a lot of men that want to speak to someone, only want to speak to a man in a professional setting. But regardless of that, there's an even deeper shortage of men's professionals.
That's a great question. May I take a I love this question. We could talk for hours on this one. So we live in a society that detaches men from their emotions, which can be fatal. That in the helping fields equates to a lot of men not being in this field. We also deal with, even though those copays are brutal, it not paying a lot from the insurance perspective. And so, you typically see men in higher paying fields. A lot of people are niched out and specialized. And so that can kind of limit it more. So you'll get more of that specialized care in a particular issue. But it can also be difficult when we have an area where we have fewer clinicians than we need, when you don't have generalists. So it's difficult. And we could talk for hours on this, and I would love talking with
I would
you
like
more,
to
but
intervene.
those are my immediate answers.
I would like to intervene on something because I deal with men, and also I have had experience dealing with mental physicians who deal with mental health for physicians. There's an ego problem here. And when there's an issue, especially dealing with veterans, since that's my specialty, veterans, or for that matter, most men, are not comfortable talking about their weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And because of that, the men and the physician, perhaps in mental health, they don't see the need because the need is not coming to them. Men, my dad was notorious for this. His saying used to say to my mother, when you go to the doctor, it's like going to a mechanic. They're going to find something wrong with you. And that's the position that men take. I'm not going for mental health. I'm not going for a physical, because there's a built-in ego that I can get through this myself. So it may have something to do with men in the field of mental health, because there's not a big need for them, because men are not comfortable going to see that. That stigma is changing, by the way, at a rapid pace, because I see the veterans now starting to find out that some of these doctors and physicians and therapists out there have had experience in the field of war battle, and also in experiences in mental health in general. So that door is opening up. You just don't see it right now.
And I was going to say, even as it relates to first responders, I'm married to a first responder. As much trauma and drama that they see, they still will not walk in that door unless someone mandates them to go in because of the drama and trauma that they've seen. And it's unfortunate that's that ego thing. It's just like, I don't want them. Is that going to affect me? Am I going to get fired because I have a mental diagnosis?
It's a tough call for men. Believe me, I sit down and talk to a lot of them, and there's a barrier there that you have to overcome. And I know from experience that a veteran who's experienced wartime will not talk to somebody that hasn't experienced wartime. But if you get in the same room with them, or the same little corner, and they know that you've experienced wartime, they'll open up to you. So there's that ego.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens with I have friends of mine who are police officers and FBI agents, and they're no different than you and I.
Mm-hmm.
They go home and they absorb it. My brother's a retired detective from Baltimore County, and the stories he's told me, the things he's seen, but when you talk to his wife, she doesn't know anything about, because he swallows it up and lets it eat him inside. And unfortunately, that happens a lot.
What's interesting, though, I predominantly, I don't see a whole lot of clients anymore, but when I predominantly saw men. And what I was hearing from them, because I'm always curious and I'm always just trying to learn from my clients, is that for some of my male clients, they felt more at ease talking to a female because of that sort of, they didn't want to show all their cards or, whatever to another man, but they felt it was a little bit easier talking to a female. I think it's, it's an individual choice. I think I see both sides of it. Having done a lot of work with first responders and really being in the trenches just in general of trauma, working with child sex abuse early in my career, and then it's evolved. But what I find is, you don't necessarily have to be a survivor of child sex abuse or sexual assault or even, combat trauma to understand and to be able to hold space. And let me back up, not to understand because you've not literally been there, but to be able to hold that space and to approach it with curiosity and to approach it with creating sort of that safe space coupled with skill and strategy. I think that's really what's most important, because, the idea is, once things are safe, you need to be able to move forward. And sometimes that's a little bit more complicated than just listening. But it absolutely starts with listening. So
yeah, definitely.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share, having retired from the school system and working in human resources, that I've heard repeatedly the cost factor, cost predictive mental health support. And many, with Harford County as being the Harford County Schools being the second largest employer and Aberdeen Brown being the largest, most of the public and big companies have employee assistance program, and so the onus is on the supervisors to make sure their staff knows the program, because it's a phone call into a confidential line. Then it takes care of me, depending on the plan, 8 to 10 is actually free. So there's no co-pays to worry about, and then it's beyond that, then your insurance starts to kick in. But that's an employee benefit that many people are not.
That's also when I said earlier, there's some insurance policies that people have, health insurance, it's embedded in there. They just have to take the time to look for it. But those services are available to them, and some of them actually have no co-pays on them.
Exactly.
And you're allowed so many sessions a year in a 12-month calendar.
Yeah.
It takes a supervisor that's aware of that, because I personally had staff that was having a moment, contacting mobile crisis. In the meantime, before I send the person home, waiting for mobile crisis, then I shared employee assistance and please call. There's the number. No one has to know. They don't even take their name. You just have to tell them your employer is such, and then they automatically take care. So it's incumbent.
We have a number now, especially for suicide prevention. It's 988, and then 988 is for civilians, and 9881 is for militaries. And they have professional counselors that will talk to you on the phone to measure and determine where your level of problems are. They can do everything from get a police officer there to an ambulance. They can make arrangements and keep you on the phone to keep you talking, to get those. And those are available to civilians too. So in the work environment in Harford County, people need to be aware of the fact that it's a phone call away, and it's a free service, and they don't ask a whole lot of information, but they're there to get assistance for you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be suicidal. It can be a situation where it's a trauma, but they need to talk to somebody.
And I just wanted to interject one thing about trauma that you You just mentioned trauma, and it made me think about this. Back in the old days, we used to have to muck into that trauma and dig it out and go through it to work on resolving it. Now we have things like EMDR, which is the only treatment acknowledged by the VA to treat PTSD.
Right.
And those of us who have experienced it know that it has amazing efficacy. It works quickly. It's quite effective. You don't have to commit to years and years of therapy. And a lot of times that can help people get through to the door as well.
Yeah. Also, too, while you're on that subject, if you're a veteran and you have veteran benefits, it does cover your family for mental health issues as well. A lot of veterans aren't aware of that. In fact, at our post here on the September the 13th, we had the VA come in, and we probably had about 30 plus veterans that sat down and talked to the VA people. And the benefits that they received from that, they were not aware that was available to them. So I would recommend that any current veteran or retired veteran check out either online or reach out to the VA. There are a lot of benefits for veterans. And if you're a civilian, there's a lot of benefits through your health benefits and through the county as well.
All right. So does anybody else have any more questions? I just want all of you to take just 1 second and just if you have any resource website or phone number to let us know. Again, I'm Ron Nassar. I'm from the Harford County Health Department. We also have a full functioning behavioral health unit at our Bel Air location. And if you need more information on that, you can go to www.harfordcountyhealth.com and we have all of our information there.
I think I have two points of contact just for my practice, Harford Counseling. It's pretty simple, harfordcounseling.com. It's pretty original. The other piece outside of 988, for our county, we are lucky in that we have a very robust warm and crisis line here locally. They will eventually get to it by 988, but if you call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, they are very familiar with all of our local resources, can come to you. If you're in the county, they can actually come to you and talk and help you sort of figure out what's the next step. It's all at no cost. So those are the 2 points of contact I would leave you with.
I've noticed here in Harford County, people like to use the telephone more than the technology a little bit sometimes, so I'll give a phone number. My personal client number is 410-776-9547. If I can't help you, I will find someone who can. And you can text me there too if you don't want to talk, because I understand.
If you're in the market for sober living for women, you can go to rageagainstaddiction.org and we can hopefully find you a bed, if not with us, with someone else in Harford County.
And I'm with Voice of a Child. It's simple. It's voiceofachild.us. That is my website. If I cannot take your child or adolescent, I do have a list of other child therapists that I go to, and we kind of feed off each other. So.
And mine's going to be real easy for you. My name is Michael Watts. I'm the state chairman for Be the One. That's Be the One, meaning that you be the one to help a veteran prevent suicide. I'm involved with the American Legion. You're sitting in a post right now. If you need help, all you have to do is reach out to somebody in this post, preferably somebody that's aware of it. They will get in touch with me. I can get you the help you need or point you in the right direction. We're there for you and your family. It doesn't make any difference if you're a veteran. We can help you out if you're a civilian, but our emphasis is on the military. So feel free to reach out to your local American Legion post. And it's Be the One. I have business cards up here I'll be happy to give to anybody, and we can get assistance for you. And I'd like to thank all these ladies up here, because without these ladies helping us, our society would be in serious trouble. And I would like to let people know how much they are appreciated and how valuable they are in our community.
Thank you all. Everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Conversations with Rich Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something from it as I did. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this, Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, I'd love it if you could leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners and share more incredible stories. Don't forget to connect with us on social media or visit our website at conversationswithrichbennett.com for updates, giveaways, and more. Until next time, take care, be kind, and keep the conversations going. You know, it takes a lot to put a podcast together, and my sponsors help out a lot, but I also have some supporters that actually help me when it comes to the editing software, the hosting, and so forth. There's a lot that goes into putting this together. So I want to thank them. And if you can, please visit their websites, visit their businesses, support them however you can. So please visit the following. Full Circle Boards. Nobody does charcuterie like Full Circle Boards. Visit them at fullcircleboards.com. The Joppatown Lions Club, serving the community since 1965. Visit them at joppatownlionsclub.org. And don't forget the E at the end of Joppatown because they're extraordinary. Sincerely Sawyer Photography. Live in the moment. They'll capture it. Visit them at sincerelysawyer.com.
The Harford County Health Department can help eligible pregnant women and children with low to average incomes get free health insurance through the Maryland Children's Health Program. Call 410-877-1040. That's 410-877-1040.